Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to episode number 62 of the Primetime Rundown here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group. I'm Joey Jarzynka. Cannot thank you all enough for joining us here on this beautiful Monday evening, and it is 7 o'clock here on the East Coast. A gorgeous day out here in New York. So for those that are spending their time inside or listening to us, we really appreciate you taking a couple hours out to hear us banter about everything in sports. Alongside my guys, Ian Schraier and Rob DeLuca, I'm Joey Jarzynka. Can't thank you all enough for joining us again on this Monday evening. Our show is presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Be sure to listen to their newest album called Free Cake. It is out now. Play loud. Take a peek on Apple Music, Deezer, YouTube, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, and Spotify. Ian Schraier, you were just at the zoo with your daughter today at the Bronx Zoo. Did we bring back any cheetahs for her, or any mountain lions, any llamas? Or you actually sent a picture to me of a llama, I believe, or was that an alpaca?
No, that was a camel.
That was a camel. Okay.
And a stuffed camel came home with us from the Bronx Zoo.
Okay, so at least you had a fun time on this gorgeous Monday afternoon. But Rob DeLuca, you are down in Seaside. How are you? And we're beginning to figure out these rooms that you're in, and obviously you're down at your house down in Seaside.
I can't. Soon enough, nobody will know where I am. Once the backdrop comes in, it'll be a beautiful thing, and then it's just going to be a big old mystery again. It's going to take away the fun of the changing backgrounds, but you know what? Matching is better. Just like we're going to match the beautiful shows we've done in the past with a great one here tonight.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And we actually have a guest later on tonight at 8:30. We will be welcoming the host of the podcast, the Music City Audible for Broadway Sports, and the writer for the Tennessee Titans for Broadway Sports and Music City Miracles, Justin Mello. He will be joining us to preview the Tennessee Titans and what they have been able to do in this offseason. That will also continue our NFL talk throughout August 30th, when we will conclude our Monday shows. So let's keep on going, fellas. Here we've got a tight-packed show here this evening on this Monday night, July 26th, episode number 62. Let's get things started. Guys, the National Hockey League welcomed team number 32 into the fold, and they welcomed in the Seattle Kraken. Let's take a recap of who they chose. First, they chose Jeremy Lauzon from Boston. They worked their way down. And actually, I was unaware of how they were going to do it. They actually did it in alphabetical order as per division. So they went from where they had Boston. Obviously, all of the teams go back to their normal divisions pre-pandemic. So they went Atlantic. Then I believe then they just really went down the list.
Yeah, Atlantic, Metro, Central, Pacific.
Yep. So there you go, right? And obviously they stuck with the Pacific at the end, save the best for last, where they will end up. Arizona now moves from the Pacific Division to the Central. I want to start with Rob DeLuca here. I want to recap Seattle and see what Ron Francis did, the general manager, did that you may have approved of, or things that you really didn't like about this expansion draft this year.
Well, this expansion draft was real interesting because when the protection lists were released by the other 30 teams just a couple of days prior, everyone was saying how general managers learned nothing from the Vegas expansion draft just 4 years ago. It seemed like Seattle was going to be gift-wrapped, a great team. A lot of high-priced and talented players were still out there. And Seattle just went in a completely different direction. They kind of went more towards we're going to try to take some lesser expensive players and depth players and just try to build something long term. But they had the opportunity to be like Vegas and be cup contenders right out of the gate. And, well, at the very least, deep playoff contenders from the start. And they essentially threw that opportunity away. Their best player came from the New York Islanders and Jordan Eberle. And I got to be honest, Jordan Eberle, great hockey player. He should never be your best player, though. And the fact that there were no side deals to these selections is what's even more shocking. So it
Yes.
tells you that Ronnie Francis took these players by choice. It's not like there was a trade like, here, we'll give you this, this, and this. As long as you don't take these guys, you can have him. He, by his own choice, chose kind of a grittier lineup that a lot of players don't. Some of them I never even heard of on the NHL rosters. I thought some of these were AHL players.
And some were AHL players. And the thing
I'm
me,
very confused as to how they went about this. And now they have a boatload of cap room to work with, and their names haven't been in any trade rumblings. And I'm not hearing their names on any of these top free agents that are out there. Yeah. When we have our great free agency special right here on the Eastern Observer Thursday night, we're going to talk about all of these acquisitions for some of these high talented players. And I don't even know if we're going to bring up Seattle, because I don't know if they're going to do anything.
And Seattle's not even at the cap floor yet, Rob.
That's the problem. So that you would expect them to be active because of this. Mm-hmm. But
they have no choice. They have no choice but to be active.
Somebody, but it seems like they're not going for the higher talented, higher priced players. Their names just haven't been in there based on what we have seen around the Twitter world with the insiders of Elliot Friedman, Frank Severalli. Seattle's name's not coming up. So I'll be very interested to see how they reach the floor, how they acquire new players, see what deals they will eventually make. But a very suspect expansion draft overall.
I'll tell you this, DeLuca, it made no sense to me when you had multiple players that you could have taken, multiple players, and one of which I'll start with the New York Islanders, for instance. When you want to take someone that has character, that can play on the defensive side and also can play an offensive role in Josh Bailey, but also wears an A on his sweater and can conceivably wear a C for your squad, he was not taken. And there were lots of talks saying, well, he's probably the route that Ronnie Francis wants to go down because he can really get this locker room adjusted into the National Hockey League by the likes of Josh Bailey. But instead, you take Jordan Eberle, you take Yanni Gourde, who I think is, I'll give you this one. Jordan Eberle is not the best player on a team. He's your second best player. Yanni Gourde is your best playmaker. And Jordan Eberle will fit right alongside on line number one, which really is a scary thought because out there in the West, and they're going to be playing in the Pacific Division, it's going to be an absolute dogfight between Vegas and Seattle. And I think that Vegas will come away with every single win. But that's besides the point. Looking at this roster, though, this to me is just made up of a bunch of second-line players, some that can play on the power play as well as the penalty kill, such as Kalle Järnkrok. And I think the best pick for them was Mark Giordano out of Calgary. Because if you really need to get somebody, some more leadership value in a Jamie Oleksiak, who I can 100% see begin to wear the A for this team beginning next year. He also just signed a 5-year deal worth $4.6 million AAV. This is definitely another player that can take you to the next level with 1 year of Mark Giordano under his belt. Ian Schraier, we also got to see the first broadcast of ESPN in the National Hockey League world for the first time since 2004. Now, when in 2004, I was 9 years old. Okay, so I don't really know a lot, and I'm not trying to age you here, but help me out here. You remember the days of Gary Thorne. You remember the days of when the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup, their final broadcast on ABC, and Gary Thorne was on that call. Talk about what you saw with Chris Fowler and former New York Rangers legend Dominic Moore, who just made that leap from NBC to ESPN.
Who knew that the Carolina Panthers played in the National Hockey League? Aside from the fact that ESPN touted it as one of their most highly watched events of the year, considering it was the first NHL anything. I mean, aside from the fact that ESPN Plus, over I believe it's been now the last 2 years, has been carrying National Hockey League games on the ESPN Plus platform, it was the first national telecast of anything on ESPN, ESPN2, anything on the Disney network. That includes ABC, excuse me. So I think to ESPN's credit, I think that was great for them that they were able to build that up a little bit leading into the draft. And then on top of that, to draw as much attraction to it because it's new. It's something that fans of ESPN that were waiting for Gary Thorne to come back, which does not seem is going to happen. The first sight of anything ESPN related to the NHL, the old music that you might have wanted to hear for the first time in 15 plus years, that ESPN was able to draw that kind of audience back for a sport that they haven't delivered on in a decade and a half. With respect to the draft itself, though, the name that I thought that I was going to see, that I thought that Ron Francis was going to go out there and get, was Carey Price. I thought that was one of the biggest misnomers, I think, just despite my issues with really the injuries, with respect to, there's a lot of question marks regarding Carey Price's health. I understand that. But when you look at the roster that Ron Francis has built and the lack thereof of goaltending that this team is going to run out there year one, I'm not saying that every team, when they, however much further the NHL decides to expand their universe in terms of how many more cities they want to expand into. I'm not saying everybody's going to be Vegas and everybody's going to go to the Stanley Cup final in their first year. But when you look at that roster from top to bottom and you look at the fact that they don't have a clear-cut number one goaltender, it boggles my mind. And you haven't even reached the cap floor yet. So you're telling me you don't want to take at least the slightest chance at the fact that the Montreal Canadiens left Carey Price unprotected, knowing the injuries, but knowing his history and knowing maybe he could be what a Marc-Andre Fleury was to Vegas. You don't take a chance on Carey Price. That really brought up the biggest question mark to me for Seattle in the draft.
So I think, to me, though, really, I think the biggest thing here is that there's a plethora of goaltenders that were available in the expansion draft. The moment you see $10 million cap hit, the moment you hear about a lot of these rumors that are going around, there's a very big possibility also that the Montreal media may have spiced this up to shy Ron Francis away from their goaltender, from their franchise goaltender. And kudos to Montreal if that was the case. I don't believe so, but at a $10 million cap hit, I think kudos to Ron Francis. I disagree with Ian, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a guy that is just about, I don't know, maybe 40 miles north, that the reason why he signed in Vancouver was because he was going to be dangled in front of this expansion draft in Braden Holtby. And the reason why he signed there was obviously to sign that 2-year deal to eventually prove himself and maybe get taken and possibly a brand new deal in a year or two or something along those lines. I think, in my opinion, though, with this whole expansion draft, it was an epic failure. And I also believe that Seattle, even though that they are $10 million away from the cap floor, I believe we are seeing what Arizona is doing right now. And what Arizona is doing right now, they are taking everyone's garbage. Literally everyone's garbage. We got to see a trade that actually just went down about, I believe, a couple hours ago with Anton Strahlman, former New York Rangers legend Anton Strahlman, who was traded with a few other picks and then was traded back, or rather the return from Arizona to Florida was just a 7th rounder in 2023. They are beginning to take all of these scraps, as the Islanders did with Andrew Ladd. They traded him over there. Vancouver, of course, traded for Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Connor Garland, as Frank Saravelli called a giant whopper of a financial transaction, because it really was, where it was nearly $70 million being traded back and forth over the border. I think just Arizona is another team, and really I would say Seattle as well should be another team similar if you don't want to go out and sign these players. That's the way I see it. I think it was an epic failure. I think,
Joey, did Seattle want to compete year one? Look, I didn't mind them going. I think your point, Joey, on Josh Bailey was it's not every day that a Ranger fan and an Islander fan agree, but I'm glad Tyler and I agree to that respect about saying not taking Carey Price was a mistake. It's not every day a franchise goalie falls in your lap. Well, it's also a mistake that the Seattle Kraken went right after Jordan Eberle and just completely overlooked Josh Bailey. Like, I know he's not the best
100%.
regular season performer, and he's a better postseason performer than he's a regular season performer. You went out there and you got guys that have won cups like Brandon Tanev and Vince Dunn, and you decided to, fill your roster with some experience and guys that have played at the highest level in the NHL. Meanwhile, you don't have anything with respect to goaltending. So I think, to Joey's point, the draft was a failure from a point of saying how Ron Francis built his roster. That's number one. I mean, I think number two, I think Chris Fowler was just a problem overall with how he led that expansion draft. There was just no enthusiasm behind it whatsoever. I mean, I think they were excited. I mean, I just want to go back to one thing about it, and I'm not trying to pour gasoline on a fire when it comes to the Islanders here, but how much did it pain Jordan Eberle to have to wear that Seattle Kraken jersey months, knowing the fact that his team, the team that he's going to play for this season, as compared to where he was only a month ago? I just kind of felt for him, with respect to how is he supposed to come to Seattle and be optimistic about where this team is heading after he just was sent off a team that was, again, a win or two away from heading to a Stanley Cup final.
And keep in mind also, Jordan Eberle years ago with Edmonton made the playoffs one time. This is the part where we might see Jordan Eberle maybe never get back to the playoffs.
It's very possible.
That is a giant possibility, and the same thing will also go for Yanni Gourde, who is a winner in Tampa. And now he's also going to have to be with 2 cups, as DeLuca was pointing out there, with 2 cups. You also have someone like Brandon Tanev as well. You've got someone, again, like Jamie Oleksiak, who is not really used to the winning part. He was in the Stanley Cup final a year ago in the bubble with Dallas. But also, again, Mark Giordano is another winner, unable to hoist the cup back in 2000 and it was 2004, 2005.
Was he on that 04 Flames?
I think he was. Yeah, I believe he was on that. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, there was talk, Joey, of him being flipped to the Rangers.
Involving the Blackwell pick, which honestly, I think the Rangers fumbled that one. That was too easy of a pick for Seattle. I would have been shocked if they took anybody else But
see, that's the thing, though. That's the thing is that in terms of a fumbling of a pick, DeLuca, I'm going to tell you this: every single pick, in my opinion, with the exception of Yanni Gourde, was a complete fumbling because there should have been side deals. Things should have happened. And you know what? And the whole thing, and really to sum up this part or this segment with the expansion draft, Frank Saravelli, Pierre LeBrun from TSN and The Athletic, essentially ruined the expansion draft and the televised version of it because everyone knew with social media, it simply is not going to... there was no enthusiasm. You saw it there. You saw it on the ground in Seattle. Everyone knew the picks. Everyone with social media knew the picks. So
Joey, do you think, and I'll leave it on this. Do you think that because this whole expansion draft turned into a spectacle, do you think that Ron Francis being held up there on the podium, on the stage, to basically interview with Chris Fowler and Dominic Moore, and also to interview basically fellow Seattle celebrities, because that's really what it was. It was basically a Hollywood red carpet of Seattle know-hows, Seattle, who's and Seattle celebrities, that took him probably away from making those side deals that he probably could have if he was in a war room, maybe in, at the Key Arena or wherever he might have been.
No, and the reason why is because we have to look back to Vegas, because Vegas, I believe they did very similar, the same exact thing. They were the arena. And they were presenting all their picks. And if I'm not mistaken, because of similar to what Tyler is saying here, you weren't getting the side deals because the NHL had already said they weren't going to let that happen twice.
No doubt. But at the same time, some of these that means you chose these players over these over more talented guys on purpose, which. What are you trying to accomplish here? It doesn't make any sense.
Because the direction, there's supposed to be a direction when you build a team. And we saw right away with Vegas, they were taking high name players when we saw Marc-Andre Fleury to start
Went for it all.
And right, exactly. And they went to start. They went obviously similar to what a lot of general managers do. They start from the goaltender and move upward, similar to what George McPhee
have
did. There is no direction at all on where Ron Francis went, but that's where we're gonna.
Allow me. Please. I will say I'll probably end up having to change my mind during our NHL preview show in September, but for now, I think that the Seattle Kraken don't make the playoffs with this roster, and it wouldn't even be close either.
Not a shot. Hold on. I'm gonna pull you back there, and and we say we're gonna stop here, but I want to just.
Is that an actual prediction right now?
I think that's a bad prediction because we said that, we didn't have our show back when Vegas became in, and they went to the Cup final. So never say never.
No, I'll wait for the NHL preview show definitely when we do it in September. But yeah, that was a rough draft. I say let's do a quick around the horn of grades. And I say the broadcast itself with Chris Fowler and all that gets an F. And the actual drafting by Ron Francis gets a D.
Yeah, I mean, again, and we appreciate Tyler sticking in with us here as he's at work right now. So glad that Tyler's doing his job. Right.
To name one by naming one, he literally named
also
one.
Neglecting how much future core talent Seattle took. Vince Dunn to name one. Okay, Tyler.
Yeah, we named one.
We said Vince Dunn. We said Brandon Tanev. We said Jamie Oleksiak. I mean, when you look down the list of what was available and who Ron Francis took, he did not. And the fact that they're not even at the cap floor, he clearly fumbled quite a few picks and chances to pick guys where he could compete right away. I don't think he did that.
No,
right. This was not a playoff build. It'll be interesting to see what he does with the rest of the offseason.
Well, he clearly has a 5-year plan as Tyler claims. But again, but you see that's the thing.
I hope so.
When you say that, when Tyler says clearly has a 5-year plan, you can't really say that when he doesn't have a plan to say. He said nothing. That's the whole thing. He said nothing.
I mean, I hope by 5 years they're playoff.
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
I think
but do we really? We wanted to see Vegas go through a 5-year plan. So I hope Tyler's right in the sense that Seattle has a 5-year plan and goes through it like the rest of the other expansion teams in this league had to go through.
Look, they're in a division with the Kings and the Ducks, who are both rebuilding. I mean,
here's the thing: because of this Seattle roster, one of them's probably ending up in the playoffs.
Yeah,
they're going to take that third spot.
Well, there's really no clear-cut winner with the exception of Vegas, and now with
Colorado,
Vancouver. No. Colorado is in the Central.
San Jose.
Oh, that's right.
San Jose, no shot.
No shot.
San Jose is in an absolute rebuild, and there's also chatter where we saw on the score.
How about that trade? How about that trade with the Sharks this morning, Joey?
Yes, it was a big one. We will get to that in our sports update in a moment. But our good friend Brian Morales, Director of Media Relations at Wagner College, B, cannot thank you enough for continuing to watch us and give us some comments as well. So Seattle doesn't get the players everyone thought. Does this mean that they were playing for top spot in the draft next year, stockpile on young players and draft picks? Now, if that's the case, again, you don't obviously have to tell us that. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this really quick, then we'll move on. There's obviously there's a consensus number one for the 2022 draft already. His name's Shane Wright, and he is supposed to be very, very good. He's going number one overall unless he gets severely injured. God forbid. He will be the number one overall pick. A lot of teams want him, the ones that aren't contending. But when you're in a lottery format, it's hard to say that.
That's my point. Yep.
We're in a lottery format. It's never the right thing to do to tank ever. Yeah, never intentionally lose games because you actually get burned. Hockey karma is real, and the hockey gods look upon that, and you will get smited if you intentionally throw it away.
So
and I know Brian Morales is a huge Knicks fan too. Like he knows better than anybody. You can't even tank in the NBA with the possibility of losing the number 1 pick. It's the same in the NHL.
yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I want to end off with Tyler's comment here, where I disagree with the latter. You can't blame a guy who just had his entire draft spoiled by keeping his mouth shut. RF, Ron Francis, is a top-tier GM. He knows what he's doing. Well then, Tyler, why is he not back in Carolina running the show? That's where I'm going to leave it at.
Just burn. Oh, and you're not even going to let him come on the show to defend him. I hope he's got some aloe for that burn you just left him, Joey.
Well, I'll be honest, because in Carolina, things went very poorly. Yes, I understand that ownership was not doing certain things and spending money, like, for instance, Alex Nedeljkovic, where Stevie Yzerman, completely fleeced the Carolina Hurricanes.
That's
for
the nice
a young
way to put it.
up-and-coming goaltender. But I hate to say it, if Ron Francis was whatever, it simply does not. It simply does not happen. If Ron Francis is a top-tier general manager, he is in Carolina still with brand new ownership, with Don Waddle and the rest of that ownership group. If he was a top-tier GM, I think he's still good. But let's move on, fellas. Here, guys. On Thursday, we've got our free agency frenzy show. Cannot wait to get that all started up on Thursday, July 29th, 7 p.m. That is actually all of the information is on our ticker on the bottom. We really appreciate everyone tuning in, as well as the guys that are coming on. We've got the Fourth Period's Dennis Bernstein. We've got Newsday's Andrew Gross, who's going to be coming on. We've got our recurring guest, Mike Zabo, who's going to be coming on. We got a few more coming on as well. It's going to be tons of fun on Thursday, but keep in touch with everybody on social media by following us at Observe Eastern on Twitter. And by following us on Twitter individually, all of our information is on the bottom. Guys, I want to continue on with this NHL segment because the New York Rangers grabbed Barclay Goodrow at a big-time deal. 6 years worth $3.6 million AAV. They traded also Pavel Buchnevich to St. Louis as well. For Ian, what he wrote here, a cap casualty, but could prove costly if they don't trade for Eichel or sign Landeskog. Well, I'll tell you why they did that, because they need fourth-line help. They also need third-line help, and they also need grit in that locker room, plain and simple. Guys, I want to touch upon this trade here. That really the Rangers acquired Barclay Goodrow's rights from Tampa Bay. He's a 2-time Cup winner. He was also on the ice when Joe Pavelski got hurt against Vegas. He did not come back in that series just a couple of years ago. Then Barclay Goodrow was shipped out. So I would say that it's a pretty good deal for a fourth liner. The term, not great. The money is pretty good. Ian, I want to start with you. You're a Rangers fan. Let's see what you got.
Well, I like the Goodrow move, and I know both of you are not a fan of the AAV that you're paying for a fourth liner, but I think a lot is going to rear its ugly head when the Islanders sign Casey Cizikas to whatever that fourth line AAV is going to be as well. I think we're learning more and more, especially what we've seen from the Islanders these past couple of years, what we've seen from the Tampa Bay Lightning these past couple of years, that now all of a sudden you're going to have to pay pretty well for bottom six talent. And I'm not trying to give, Chris Drury all the credit in the world, because he's going to get an F in my book right now on the Pavel Buchnevich trade, because everybody believed that was leading into a trade for Jack Eichel. And that appears is not on the table right now, maybe not on the table at all. So I do like the Goodrow move. This is a team that is in dire need of bottom six help and dire need of grit. That is something that owner James Dolan asked for in the offseason with respect to how he saw his team compete against those top tier teams of the Eastern Division, who they could not compete against because they did not have those kind of players. Now, with respect to Buchnevich, that's a concern because this guy is a top six forward. This is a guy who produces when he's healthy. And if they can't find a guy to replace him or put another scorer on that wing right now, and you're going to depend on young players who are still unproven, like Filipino. You had to like what you saw last year out of a guy like Vitaly Kravtsov, but I don't know if those kind of guys are top six forwards yet. So I think there's a lot of questions going in. They're still in need of center help. There's talk of Ryan Strome still on the trade block. So if he goes, what exactly besides Chris Kreider are you doing at center? So I think for the Rangers, there's still a lot of question marks to be answered, but the Barclay Goodrow move was a step in the right direction, no question.
And I think also, before we get to Rob DeLuca, I just want to throw my 2 cents out here. I think that the next move, and I'm going to say this wholeheartedly for a lot of Rangers fans out there and even Islanders fans too, look for Phil Deneau to be chased by Chris Drury and the Rangers, because really, who can fit alongside Barclay Goodrow on that fourth line? Philip Deneau perfectly. He can play on the penalty kill, and he is, in my opinion, one of the best penalty killers as well as defensive forwards in the entire NHL, and will be paid like one. I don't know if it's going to be the Rangers, but there's also some chatter that the Florida Panthers are also out there. But the Montreal Canadiens are going to be letting Phil Deneau get to Wednesday unscathed. DeLuca, your thoughts on this Goodrow move? I know you didn't like the term.
Yeah, no, look, you don't give term like this to fourth line players, bottom six players. You don't do it. The money's fine, but teams need to stop trying to replicate the Islanders' fourth line that literally defies all logic of fourth lines. It can't be replicated. It's simply not possible. And honestly, I think
you can with the right players.
Chris Drury's off to a poor start here as Rangers as GM this offseason. Like, look, getting Goodrow, great move. It was a good move. He helps the bottom six.
I don't know if you
the contract's not great.
DeLuca, I don't think you're giving him enough credit for unloading the, Nick. I was just saying Nick Holden. I don't know why I'm losing my mind here.
Yeah, no, Ian, that wasn't that GM. Not that GM.
Who that did it, Ian.
Look,
I'm losing my mind.
He's struggling right now
on former Rangers, but no, I don't think by any stretch you can call the one. You got to give it past Wednesday to really.
Oh, I will. No. Of course, I'll do that. But when we get to the Buchnevich trade, I'll explain why he's struggling. Yeah, when we get to the Buchnevich trade, I'll explain why that was completely wrong. But the Goodrow deal, the money, like I said, money's good. I'm not a fan of giving bottom six players. Mainly, Goodrow's probably going to hang out on the fourth line, maybe the third line, depending how the season plays out. You don't give someone like that 6 years. Sure, he's young, but I see a lot of risk in locking down depth players like that. You should max it out at like 4 years at most. But the term is fine. But the money is good. The money is good though. So I'm not completely against it, but 6 years is a little much. It's not the worst thing in the world. But it's risky. It's risky to commit to players for a long time, and that applies to anybody really. 6 years is a long time.
So the Barclay Goodrow deal, in my opinion, you look at what he was able to do in 2015-16 when the Stanley Cup finalists Sharks they lost in 6 to Pittsburgh. He's also won 2 cups with the Tampa Bay Lightning. What other New York Ranger on that squad has a Stanley Cup? Okay, there we go. Cricket.
Yeah, you make a good point.
I make a good point, and the reason why is because you have to look at this entire roster. Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, Artemi Panarin. You have to look at these leaders and these Stanley Cup guys that have been to the Cup final, that have made it to the Cup.
Those are the type of players the Rangers have been missing for years.
Exactly. And really, they also were missing it when they went to the Cup final in 2013-14 against the LA Kings, and when they lost in 5. That's the bottom line. They were missing that, and it's very evident that they also need the grit. Keep in mind, back in 2013-14, there were a lot of rumors, and not even rumors, but a lot of talk that the NHL was beginning to adapt into a more of a speed game. Now we're beginning to see where it begins to kind of shift a little bit, where now the grit is beginning to come back. And for instance, we remember back when Pittsburgh, back in 2011, 2012, when they were smoked by the New York Rangers, okay? In the playoffs, in the first round, I believe. That was when Marc-Andre Fleury was, that was his, his last few years of stardom over in Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh was all about speed. The West Coast was all about being tough, fighting guys, grit, all of the above. Now we're beginning to see how to win. How do you win the Stanley Cup? You are beginning to see the East Coast teams. They are realizing what they need to do is have some grit on that fourth and third line. We got to see it in Tampa. You have a solid top six, and then you have a solid bottom six. You also can see it with the New York Islanders as well. They roll all four lines, and that is how the Tampa Bay Lightning were able to win their previous 2 cups. In Pittsburgh, well, think about it. Were they able to roll all 4 lines? No, I believe it was really the top 3. You had the fourth on a little bit here and there. And the same thing goes for their defensive core. The top 4 were the ones to be able to get rolled out by Mike Sullivan. But Tampa
learned that the hard way in 2014, Joey. That's
exactly.
That's really where it all started, was because the Rangers were built on speed and had no physicality, and
the Kings were able to roll all 4 lines. Yeah. That's what it was. They were able to go all 4 lines, and I think that that's really where the NHL now is leading to. Again, is that it's not all about this, and we get to see it in Toronto. They are the perfect example because they do not roll all 4 lines, and when they do, Jason Spezza has nobody on his wings. And when Mike Babcock had Matt Martin up there in Toronto, and in the playoffs, he benched him. He didn't play him at all. And you needed a little bit of grit to be able to, win your first playoff round since 2004 or win anything since 1967. But that's besides the point. The point is that now the league is beginning to turn its little head around and eventually get back to grit. Anyone want to continue on this with the Pavel Buchnevich deal?
Yeah, sure. This is where I take issue with Chris Drury's start. The problem with this trade is Buchnevich was arguably the Rangers' best player down the stretch last season, and I think that moving him, while potentially necessary to get Jack Eichel, wrong player to trade to not send to Buffalo. That was the wrong player to not send to Buffalo, because that is a fair player to send back for Jack Eichel. When Chris Kreider,
they don't want him. They don't want him.
When Chris Kreider is sitting right there to be traded to clear up some cap space, and you go with Pavel Buchnevich instead,
that's value.
DeLuca.
Chris Kreider has 0 value, and the Rangers made the biggest.
Well, what'd you get back? Well, you're telling me you couldn't get that back for Chris Kreider? It's not like you got anything
DeLuca,
special.
You have a no movement. He has a no movement clause as well.
Oft injured, very streaky when he scored with regards to his scoring output. So if
Rangers are stuck with that contract the whole way.
Maybe Ronnie Francis wants to call about Chris Kreider. That would be the only team at this point that I would think would want to call about him.
But now my main point is the fact that the trade for Jack Eichel hasn't happened yet is more than concerning for the New York Rangers, because the whole point of moving Buchnevich was to get this guy.
No, yes and no.
It's fair, but no.
Yes.
So it's at this point, it's like, but what are you going to have to send to Buffalo now for Jack Eichel? Is the question. Because I feel like Buchnevich would be a perfect asset.
My question with Buffalo now really more lies with how much leverage do you have now that you just sent 2 of your 3 best players are gone now. Ristolainen gone, Reinhart gone. So exactly how much leverage do the Pagulas have in Buffalo right now with Jack Eichel, when you know this team is not going to win, and you know you're going to have unhappy elite player on your roster come October?
No, I agree with you there, Ian. But I will say this: if the Rangers don't get someone to equate Buchnevich like a Jack Eichel, that trade's a bust.
No, it's not, because again, exactly what I just said. Sammy Blais is a 3rd and 4th line player. He is going to fit in nicely on the right wing alongside a Barclay Goodrow. A Barclay Goodrow, or even if you throw money at a Phil Deneau. That is a phenomenal 4th line that you are building. And Sammy Blais also, he didn't get to see a lot of playing time because there are too many good players out in St. Louis.
That's correct. But you don't remove 20-25 goals this season to build bottom 6 depth. That's just not what you don't remove that kind of scoring without trying to implant a replacement. So I really hope that I mean, personally, I really don't as a Devils fan, but for Rangers fans' sake, I really hope there's a plan in place from Chris Drury.
I can't imagine after trading Buchnevich that they're not trying come Wednesday. I mean, there are people who still believe by October 13th that Jack Eichel is going to be a Ranger, but
yes,
I think something has to be in the works to answer for this Buchnevich move.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. But also, again, both teams have to get to, or rather, the Buffalo Sabres have a lot of cap space that they have to fill. They have to get at the bare minimum of $16.65 million to the cap floor. So they've got a lot of work to do. And if they were to trade Jack Eichel at the bare minimum, they would be down at $26 million because his cap hit is $10 million. Guys, let's keep on moving here in the world of hockey. Just a couple of updates. The Sabres were selling off pieces, as you brought up. Ian Schraier, Rasmus Ristolainen was traded to Philadelphia. Sam Reinhart was traded to Florida. And we don't know where Eichel's going to land. We have no idea. But there is also some rumblings, too, in the Boston area, as well as Nashville, that we can say right now former, but the previous captain of the Anaheim Ducks, Ryan Getzlaf, is getting some looks over in Boston. And I think that would be a phenomenal get for Boston. 100%.
Joey, it would be it would essentially cement the piece that their window is kind of closing in Boston, and Getzlaf would kind of be a piece that could help help them make that one last push for that championship.
Like Paul Stastny going back to Winnipeg at this point.
Exactly.
No and actually there is also some chatter from our good friend Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period saying that there is some mutual interest in a return for Paul Stastny heading back to play in Winnipeg. Guys, let's keep on moving forward here. We also got to see Jake Voracek for Cam Atkinson, 1-for-1, Columbus and Philadelphia. That is a big deal. The star right winger, Jake Voracek, was sent back to Columbus where his career started. Cam Atkinson, let's not forget, about a $2.75 million less AAV for Philadelphia. This, in my opinion, was a phenomenal move. And also, in my opinion, too, insurance if Claude Giroux were not able to re-up in Philadelphia. That is some big news there. Not a lot of people are talking about that deal, but you really got to look into it. And you got to say to yourself, if Claude Giroux wants more than $8.25 million that he's making now, he's not getting in Philadelphia. Guys, Major League Baseball, the hot stove is beginning to heat up, as Ian Schraier has written down in here. The Tampa Bay Rays, they opened up the trade deadline, and they acquired Nelson Cruz. For the first time, I feel like in my entire life, they actually went out to acquire a big-time name. Ian Schraier, what does this do for the rest of the AL East? And not only that, but also for the rest of the Major League Baseball in their defense to get, or at least as in their defense of World Series finalists.
Well, I'm not going to allow Rob here to grind his gears about the Yankees and whether or not they're still in play for the
we're going to still talk about it. There's no,
we're not. We're not going to do that. If you want to keep this a kid's show, you will not let me do that.
I look, it further lengthens the Rays lineup. I mean, it's a lineup that's already able to hit just about 1 to 9, and Nelly Cruz just gives them more pop in the thick of that lineup. The guy went deep in his first game in a Tampa Bay Rays uniform, no less. And this is a guy that I don't want to say a guy that they were missing in their run towards the World Series last year, because we saw the run that Randy Arozarena went on, but Nelly Cruz does have that experience of playing in the World Series with the Texas Rangers back in 2011, 2012. And I think that goes a long way in terms of experience. I think the next piece for the Rays is just trying to stack up on a little more pitching. That's really the key. And I know they're one of those teams that has their eyes on Max Scherzer right now. So, but this is a great move for Tampa Bay. I mean, they have to find a way to keep competing with the Red Sox. It's really them or the Sox or the Rays division at this point.
Yep.
And the Rays just need to continue to find ways to score runs the way they do, because the Sox are just kind of keeping up with them just step for step in terms of plating runs. And we saw it this weekend with the Sox, and we see it every night with the Rays. So great move down in West Florida for Tampa for sure.
It's really crazy. Right. Yeah, it's really crazy, DeLuca, to see how Tampa Bay is 92 runs. They have 92. Their run differential rather is plus 92. So that's pretty good. And
and now you're adding Nelson Cruz. That's just phenomenal news with all the sarcasm sprinkled on top for the rest of the AL East. It is not a good time to be a Yankees fan, a Red Sox. Well, for a Red Sox fan, you're still in first place. It's a good time, but it's not a good time to see that Nelson Cruz has gone to your biggest threat to the division title. So that, and then you see Toronto, who was fighting to stay in that playoff race, to see that we still have to play Tampa Bay this amount of times, and now we have to see Nelson Cruz on top of a team that was already scoring many runs a game. Not a great thing for the AL East. An amazing, beautiful, almost perfect get for the Tampa Bay Rays. It might be exactly what they needed, and it's going to be a tight race between them and Boston down the stretch.
Yeah, and just by looking also at some of their team statistics here as well for the Tampa Bay Rays, they sit 7th in Major League Baseball in earned run average with a 3.58. Their starters are a little
Oh, their bullpen is just so good.
So that's the whole thing. Their starters, they need lots of help. There's no doubt about it. And they also shipped up Rich Hill to the New York Mets, which, again, you say to yourself that, well, why would you do that when, you need some starter help, you need some whatever, but, it's evident, again, what Ian was saying, that they're chasing after Max Scherzer. They're chasing after these top-tier pitchers, and they are going to be competing with the San Diego Padres for a lot of these big-time players in their pursuit to the World Series again.
I do have an answer for Tyler's comment, by the way. When please move on.
So I want to actually, and it's a perfect segue actually, because with Tyler's comment, the Rays trading for Nelson Cruz puts the rest of the AL East on notice that they are looking to be big time players. I won't mention names, but Brian Cashman
World Series
needs to wake up.
Who can I ask Tyler this question, and please feel free, as Tyler's been doing all night, to comment, and we appreciate it between him and Brian adding in their comments tonight as for our show.
We're gonna get Brian's comment up there in a moment.
Who is and the same thing goes for Brian's comment as well. Who is Brian Cashman trading? Who's he trading? Who has any value at this point?
Aaron Judge.
Who is taking on Stanton's contract?
Nobody. Stanton's not going anywhere. It's Aaron Judge.
I mean, and who are you asking for a return? Like, we're going to get to the Padres in a second. Let's talk about Eric Hosmer to the Yankees, basically as a casualty because they just traded for Adam Frazier. So who are you sending for Eric Hosmer? I don't even think the Yankees need Eric Hosmer. I mean, short right field porch, great. That's what Luke Voit was doing last year. Like where do you?
Luke Voit is a righty. Eric Hosmer is a lefty.
But who do you want the Yankees to trade? Who are they? What contracts can they get off their books at this point? I don't want to get on a Yankee tangent for too long, and I can see Rob is just about ready to explode. But what contract are you unloading at this point? If you're the Yankees,
you're not unloading any. You're taking it on. You're gonna take on a big contract.
I don't agree with him here either. Like, he's got all these prospects that they only want to ever use when people get hurt, like Estevan Florial. Like, how much value does he have?
He doesn't have much. That's the problem.
Davy Garcia, how much value does he have right now? Like, nobody has any value right now in that farm system. Nobody.
No,
I mean, they shipped James Caprillion to Oakland. Look how well he's pitching right now for the A's. Like, where do you want to get started on this great farm system that the Yankees supposedly have?
Let's get Brian's comment up there. He responds to Tyler, not Tyler. Cashman can stay sleeping and trade for Sherlock Holmes because he doesn't have a clue regardless. I mean, that's really the truth. It really is the truth. And Brian says, Rob, breathe, brother. There's no doubt about it.
We'll get to the Yankees and we'll get to the Yankees in a second.
This team's 4 games over 500, nine games back. Who are we gonna buy that's gonna get them back into this division race? That's the real question I should be asking Tyler. Who specifically are the Yankees gonna buy that gets them back in the race?
I don't understand how they're in the discussion for Trevor.
Because here's the thing,
it's unbelievable. But
the Yankees bullpen needs more than help, Tyler. The Yankees bullpen needs way more than help. They need church. They need prayers. They need
a full makeover.
Joey, put the other comment up. Put the most recent comment up there. Because I'm no, not that one. No, the recent one.
The most recent one. The fact that Cashman has a job is disgusting.
Yeah, I called for his firing 10 years ago, Tyler, and everyone thought I was crazy back then. And yet here we are 10 years later, and now apparently more people are finally starting to see the light. So
I called for his firing following the rather I'm laughing at Tyler's comment. We'll get to that in a moment. I called for his firing once Giancarlo Stanton's deal was taken back. Tyler says, I would rather have a bag of used Staples at shortstop than Gleyber Torres. You see, that's the thing.
That's not what you guys were saying after the Aroldis Chapman trade, now were you?
Well, you see, that's the thing, though, is that
because when we first got Torres, he played second base. We didn't have DJ LeMahieu.
But the whole problem, though, is again, is that you have to realize that giving up Didi Gregorius now might have been a massive mistake.
Yeah, giving Joe Girardi his weapons, pretty much. Even though the rest of that Phillies roster is a joke anyway.
The door was the Yankees' biggest mistake.
Pushing who out the door? Joe Girardi?
Yes.
Well,
he actually made his
Ian,
players.
Guess what?
He actually made his players accountable.
Hey, Joey, guess what? Or no, not Joey. Ian, I agree with you. I never wanted Joe Girardi fired. How do you fire someone who sends you one game from the World Series and a team that was supposed to be a rebuild, and you fall one game short of the World Series, and that's only because your opponent cheated? What are we supposed to do here? How do you justify letting that man go?
It's not an ideal situation whatsoever for the New York Yankees where they are. But before we get to really anything else with the New York Yankees, I don't want to dive into this deal of Domingo Germán really doing fantastic. He took a no-hitter yesterday into the 8th inning. Rob DeLuca said,
we're not getting into this game. Move on. We are not getting into that game. We are not talking about that game. We're never going to talk about it. It's never going to exist. It never happened. It's gone. It died. It's goodbye.
The San Diego Padres are going all in, and they are going for it all. They acquired Adam Frazier from the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's also a lot of talk saying that they are pursuing Max Scherzer. We now know that the Los Angeles Dodgers most likely are not getting they're not getting Trevor Bauer back. And it seems to me also from many rumors and for many people around Major League Baseball that Trevor Bauer will not be returning, not only not be returning, but his teammates do not want him back. That's number one. To answer the next question is that where does San Diego stand in the National League West when now they are not chasing? Well, they are chasing Los Angeles, but keep in mind, they're also chasing the San Francisco Giants. Ian Schraier, I want to start with you.
I mean, this goes back to what I was saying about Hosmer potentially being dealt to the Yankees. I mean, they now have an infield full of all-stars. I mean, you go around the horn, you've got Cronenworth going to play now full-time at first, Frazier at second, Tatis at short, and Machado at third. This is a team that hasn't had an issue. Well, here's the thing for the San Diego Padres. This is a team that hasn't had an issue scoring runs all year, yet they're still, I believe it's, 4 games out of first in the West. I mean, somehow the San Francisco Giants have found the fountain of youth, and the Dodgers are just the Dodgers. I mean, look, I know Trevor Bauer's not coming back, but this team is still loaded offensively. You still have guys like Walker Buehler headlining your rotation to a point where you don't really need to worry too much about Trevor Bauer. His numbers haven't been anything startling as compared to his Cy Young year last year in Cincinnati. It shows what this move does for the San Diego Padres. This is a 2-year window for the Padres right now. And I believe during spring training, they had mentioned they had listed like the probable World Series matchups, I believe it was, for the next 10 years. And I believe next year it was supposed to be the San Diego Padres against the Chicago White Sox based on the elevation, the track of where the teams are really sitting. And you can see the White Sox and the Padres based on how they've built their teams kind of heading on into a World Series matchup at some point. But to me, this is a 2-year window now. Yeah, Brian, absolutely. They're a straight fun team. They score runs at will. I mean, they're a team that's built from the top down. AJ Preller is ready to make a run at a championship, and it's and understandably why. I mean, I don't think they're thrilled with the production they're getting out of Will Myers. Right now, I think he's an expendable piece, and so is Eric Hosmer, as you could see from the Frazier trade and moving Cronenworth over to first. But remember, they're also getting Mike Clevenger back next year. So now you're going to have a rotation that if you try to add Scherzer to that. So now look at, you've got a rotation built of Scherzer if he gets acquired by San Diego, Scherzer, Paddock, Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove. And then you add Clevenger that next year and push Paddock out the door. I mean, you've got.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you, Ian. How about your guy Chris Paddock? Where does he fit into this equation?
Paddock is still a number 5 starter at best, but obviously when Clevenger comes back, he'll get pushed out of the rotation. And then
he'll be the number 3 starter next year. Don't you worry.
Then news broke at like 10 o'clock last night, except nobody validated it, was that supposedly Craig Kimbrell was coming back to San Diego. So this team is far from done. This is a team, I don't know if I see them in the World Series this year, but I'm sure this is a move that's going to elevate them because Frazier still has a year left of control to elevate them towards maybe a World Series in 2022.
That's tough. I'm going to tell you this.
I don't know if I see it this year. I don't know if I see it this year.
It's real tough. I mean,
this is a team that should be head to head with the Dodgers right now for the NL West, and they're not there right now.
They're not there yet, but because you also have to ask the question: when are the San Francisco Giants going to die off? Are they going to die off? That's just a question you have to ask because nobody, and I will literally say nobody. There's nobody out there.
Oh, hold on, guys. We might have breaking news here.
I love it.
Hold on. I just want to verify here. There was a tweet that just went out that said the Dodgers acquired Max Scherzer, but I'm actually going on Twitter right now to try to confirm that this is true.
I don't think that's the case. No
way. There's no shot. Just
keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind that 'tis the season for fake accounts that Ian might have just gotten.
No. That actually was a legitimate account, but it wasn't from like John Heyman or Jeff Passan, but Jeff Passan. But there is actually 27 minutes ago though a report from John Heyman saying that the Yankees have made a trade offer.
Was just going to come here to say. I was just about to say that.
Yeah, no evidence of any traction there at this point. Rockies haven't definitively decided to trade him, though it would seem there's a good chance they do. So the Yankees have made a trade offer for.
Well, now I wonder what on earth that trade offer could be, because what's buying him going to do? What's buying him going to solve? It's going to solve our shortstop problem, but the Yankees have way more problems than that. So
according to the San Diego Padres, they want to acquire him and put him in center field. So you got me there.
Well, you could do that, especially when you are so loaded over there. And let's not forget, Ian Desmond went from shortstop to center field out in Colorado. So listen, it very well can happen if Trevor Story were to do that. And eventually go to San Diego. Doubtful that happens, but you never know. That could be some big news brewing for the San Diego Padres. Guys, the Mets addressed necessary back-end starters with Rich Hill. His first start went okay. More pitching help, though, is needed. Ian Schraier, I want to start with you. You're the Mets fan here.
He pitched 5 strong innings on Sunday against yesterday against the Cincinnati Reds. He was scheduled to pitch Saturday for the Rays, got traded, and came over to the Mets. And the Mets, who are just in dire need of any pitching help whatsoever, went out and got Rich Hill. Didn't trade too much for him. Traded a catching prospect outside their top 30 and a pitcher in Tommy Hunter, who is out for the season. So credit to Zach Scott and Sandy Alderson for making a move for a guy that has experience. For a guy, I mean, I know I'm going to pitch the Long Island part here and say, hey, a former Long Island Duck comes home, but this was a nice move for the Mets, a much needed move, because this is a team that is just patchwork right now in their rotation until DeGrom comes back, until Carrasco comes back, until Syndergaard comes back, and we can go right on down the list. So this was a nice move. He pitched 5 strong innings, helped the Mets to a win yesterday at home I said in Cincinnati. I meant to say at home yesterday over the Blue Jays. So nice win for a nice starting result, a nice first result for Rich Hill for the Mets.
And something else too, what the New York Mets, even though that DeGrom's earned run average is, I think, less than 1 or a tiny bit over 1.
I think it's just now a shade over 1. It's like 1.2
So,
or something
yeah,
like
so
that.
it's a shade over 1. They still rank 5th in Major League Baseball in earned run average, and a lot of it obviously has to do with him. 3.52 earned run average in 97 games played. As we said, that's its 5th, just behind the Padres, Brewers, Giants, and Dodgers. So the Mets are another team that really should be really put under the microscope heading into trade deadline Friday. That's going to be tons of fun as well, because there's a lot of chatter that the Mets could be trading for Chris Bryant. There's some chatter that Craig Kimbrell could be on the move. We don't know where, but in addition to free agent frenzy on Thursday, also trade deadline Friday for Major League Baseball is going to be, as Brian Morales says, straight fire. Good things coming up for Major League Baseball, guys. Let's keep on moving here. We got to see also what the Seattle Mariners, apparently he is, or not he, they are in pursuit of outfielder Whit Merrifield. He also plays second base as well. And he's in control until 2023. And it makes me wonder what the Kansas City Royals would be doing if they didn't hang up the phone. There's no reason why they should even be taking any offers. Why else did they acquire Andrew Benintendi then? Don't you want to build around a few guys?
Allegedly.
I when I read that and put that on the list to discuss tonight, I really couldn't believe it, because the Mariners are not a win now team. I believe Kyle Seager, their long tenured third baseman, I believe his contract is up at the end of the year. And maybe they need a guy to come in and play third base, though Whit Merrifield's primary position is either second base or the outfield. Maybe that's the reason behind it. I don't understand why the Mariners, of all teams, I mean, are they looking to be active in the offseason and try to make a run at a very, very weak AL West outside the Houston Astros? I think there's a lot of question marks as to why the Royals would look to unload Whit Merrifield. I'm not really holding anything to the fire on this just yet. I think the Mets have actually inquired about Whit Merrifield, but I think that's a player, if the Mets wanted to acquire, I think they should look to acquire when he hits the free agent market in a couple of years. That would make the most sense for the Mets. I think right now, guys what we're learning more than ever on the hot stove now is that guys with years of control left costs more. I mean, it costs more prospects. It costs higher tier prospects. These teams do not want to give up guys that they're paying next to nothing for big contracts. So you're going to have to unload more from your farm to get players like this. So it makes no sense for the Mariners whatsoever. I'd be shocked to see this trade go through. I'm not holding anything to the fire with Merrifield to the Mariners just yet.
Yeah, I don't.
Even though the rumblings are there.
I think
that's just some hot
people like to throw sticks in the fire, keip it burning. But
I mean, look,
I don't.
Guys
like
John Heyman and
No, I get their I get that.
I think that would be foolish.
No sense.
That would be foolish for
I have the question of why to both teams. I have the same question. Why? Why are the Royals trying to move him? Why are the Mariners trying to
I don't think they're trying to move him at all. I think the way it sounds to me, Seattle picked up the phone and said, "Hey, is Whit Merrifield available?" And then they probably
How is there not reports of the Royals GM laughing and hanging up? Why are there no reports of that? Because if I was the Royals GM, I'd laugh and hang up.
Because there's probably nothing to discuss further. That's the biggest thing too. There's really not much.
As soon as I don't even know if I'd take the time to laugh. As soon as I heard Whit Merrifield, I'd hang up the phone.
Brutal.
I wouldn't even give it the time of day.
Brutal stuff, guys. But ladies and gentlemen, it is 8:03 here on the East Coast. Alongside my guys, Ian Schraier, Rob DeLuca, I'm Joey Jarzynka. Cannot thank you all enough for joining us here on this Monday evening, July 26th. It's a great day, or a great night rather, to be on our show, because we will be welcoming in about 26 minutes. We will be welcoming a guest that will put the cap on our week number 2 of previewing the 2021 NFL season. Justin Mello, host of the podcast, The Music City Audible for Broadway Sports. He also writes for the Tennessee Titans for the aforementioned Broadway Sports and Music City Miracles, and also covers the NFL draft for Draft Network, the Draft Network. So we've got a great guest on board with us, and that's actually going to lead us into our little talk of the AFC South. Guys, 2 weeks ago, we got to discuss the NFC North with the Athletics' Matt Schneidman, who covers the Green Bay Packers. Really good to have him on. And today we're going to continue our slew of guests here tonight as we discuss the AFC South. Let's start off with this, fellas. A little preview here with the Indianapolis Colts. Ian Schraier, I want to start with you here. Because you're a Giants fan, you're no longer will be seeing Carson Wentz. Obviously, he didn't really do much anyway to the New York Giants in his short stint here in Philadelphia, So what do you see about the Indianapolis Colts this year? Are they looking to go back to the promised land, and can they get back there with him at the helm?
It's tough. I mean, a lot is depending on whether or not that chemistry is there between Carson Wentz and his former offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, now the head coach of the Colts, and Frank Reich. If they can find a way, sure. I mean, I think that if Carson Wentz can find that old magic, I think it's a 2-team race in the AFC South. If not, I think it's the Titans division to lose going away. I think we've seen the issues of Carson Wentz the last couple of years. I think Joey can elaborate on them tenfold. The issues that we've seen with Carson Wentz the last couple of years. He's not consistent. I know last year the Eagles didn't have much of an offensive line, so I think that really played a big factor into it. I think the talent is still there. The question is can Frank Reich, and reuniting with his former offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, be the difference maker and turn the Colts back into a Super Bowl contender? I'm not so sure yet. I think we're going to have to see it more on the field the first few weeks and judge from there.
I'm going to throw this one out there, and I think the Indianapolis Colts, this is their division to lose. And I want to say, and there's no doubt, I really believe that is the case. I think that Carson Wentz going back to his offensive coordinator in Frank Reich, this will not only rejuvenate his career, but also being behind one of the league's best offensive lines will not only help his redevelopment, but that same exact system with a couple of tweaks for Carson Wentz will be put back into place, and we will be seeing a lot of what we saw in Philadelphia in 2017 prior to Carson Wentz blowing out his ACL against the Los Angeles Rams back in Week 16 in the LA Coliseum. I really do believe that is the case. I'm not going to lie to you. And even though that, there's the defensive side of the football for the Colts is just continuing to get better. We remember a couple of years ago when Chuck Pagano was the head coach, and prior to him getting cancer, he was really leading the charge on one of the worst defensive teams in the entire NFL, like historically bad. And I think now that we are beginning to see this Colts team take a turn, I really do believe that with everybody led by Darius Leonard in the middle as a linebacker, it's only going to move up. And I don't think that if they were to move downward in the standings or even move downward in their development towards getting back to where they were with Andrew Luck, I think that would be an epic failure. But I don't see that happening. I really do believe that, as Brian Morales said, wow, bold Joey, seriously, I do believe that this is their division to lose.
I think the offense has a lot of bright spots. I think you have that three-headed monster in the backfield with Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines, and you've got T.Y. Hilton still as your wide receiver one, and he's always a threat to break off a big play. You've got Michael Pittman as your number two. Jack Doyle has really turned into a nice tight end piece. So I think offensively, I think Wentz has the pieces to succeed. I still have some questions on the offensive line aside from Quentin Nelson. I think you're asking a lot from Eric Fisher to hold down that left tackle role coming off a serious injury. On the defensive side of the ball, you have to ask for a repeat of last year. And I think that's a lot to ask for. You're putting a lot of stake into Kwity Paye, their first round pick out of the University of Michigan, panning out right away. You do have a guy who can, like DeForest Buckner, a veteran player, who can really be very abrupt and really make a lot happen on the interior. But I think for the Colts, a lot has to do with them defensively, as well as just with regards to the what happens with Carson Wentz. I mean, it all falls back, Joey, to Carson. But I think that there's some questions on the defensive side of the ball too, and that's why I'm not so willing to put the Colts out there as the AFC South champions.
So first, I just want to say that it looks as if that DeLuca's Wi-Fi has just gone down. So it's going to be you and I holding down the fort, Ian, just for a few moments. But from
hopefully
what
back soon.
Yeah, hopefully we get him back soon. But what I can tell you though is that looking at what this offensive line is all about, Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, and heck, even Eric Fisher. He was a cap casualty in Kansas City. You've got him out there. Unfortunately, Costanzo is no longer
Costanzo, right? Yes.
is no longer there as well. So you've got a decent core over in Indianapolis on that offensive line. Even think about the defensive line as well. You've got DeForest Buckner.
Yeah.
He is going to be leading the charge. Grover Stewart, who had a phenomenal year last year, is going to be back playing alongside Buckner in that 4-3 scheme. We brought up Darius Leonard earlier. And even though also that Xavier Rhodes did not have a great year last year in Minnesota, he looks to revamp his career on a pretty porous secondary in Indianapolis. Look for him to do well. Rock Ya-Sin, also he missed time with COVID last year. He was a big piece to that secondary, as well as Kenny Moore. We have to give that as well. Kenny Moore was a breakout candidate last year in Indianapolis. He did phenomenally. Expect good things. I think for Indianapolis, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be tons of fun this upcoming year. And let's keep on moving forward here. Unfortunately, we do not have Rob DeLuca just yet. Hopefully, we will get him back sooner rather than later. Ian, I want to keep on moving here and go to the Houston Texans, because really the AFC South, aside from the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans, again, we're going to have Justin Mello on later in our show about 15 minutes from now. It's very evident that there is really no direction for Houston. And Deshaun Watson might not be the answer later on for this Texans team. We say that because he has requested a trade officially, and they are going to be listening to offers on Deshaun Watson, and there's really not much to look forward to for this Texans team.
You know what you can ask for Deshaun Watson. The problem is, what is a team going to pony up with him with the baggage against him right now is number one. And we see this year in and year out. I mean, right now, I think even with Deshaun Watson, I have the Texans as a last place team in the AFC South. I actually have the Jacksonville Jaguars slightly ahead of them, if not maybe dead even. Just because I think the Jaguars are going to be, even with a rookie quarterback, excuse me, a more competitive team. When you look at the roster for the Texans, top to bottom, I mean, there's just so many holes, so many question marks. I mean, this is a team, in my opinion, that is going to be fighting for the number one draft pick come next April. Look, I think David Johnson showed spurts of his old self last year. Brandon Cooks is on the downside of his career at this point. That's two pieces right there. I mean, granted, you're asking a lot out of 30-some-odd-year-old Randall Cobb at this point to be a number 2 receiver in Houston, whether that be Deshaun Watson or not. And then if Watson bails, your starting quarterback now all of a sudden becomes Tyrod. I've got questions there. The best player on your defense right now, if you're Houston, is Vernon Hargreaves, who has not panned out yet as a first-round draft pick
at all
when Tampa Bay drafted him out of college. So this is a team that's going to give up a lot of points. I'm not even sure if even with Deshaun Watson under center, if this team, even with Laramie Tunsil still anchoring that offensive line, will even have enough to even be able to outscore teams, even if they can, with the players available to him. I think the Texans are in full-on rebuild mode. They are number 1 draft pick aiming mode. That last place at this point, maybe they're dead even with the Jaguars for a tie for third place, but right now last place.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. I honestly believe that the Texans will be worse than the Jaguars. I think that there's so
Yeah,
much
I would.
upside
Yeah.
with Urban Meyer. There's a lot of upside with, Tim Tebow. He was signed there as a tight end. Obviously, there's nothing to come from that.
Stop.
But listen, I'm going to tell you this much. What I will tell you though is that I really do believe that, and I wish we had Cecil Shorts with us here, former NFL wide receiver who actually played with the Texans. We'll have him on at some point down the road. But looking at the cap numbers, as everyone knows that I love looking at the cap numbers. Deshaun Watson this year is making $15.94 million. Next year, the cap elevates all the way to $40.4 million for him individually. Not really much to discuss there because the Texans are not spending any money. You look at everybody else next year, there is no path. There's really no path for Houston whatsoever. And you look at their wide receivers. They made plays last year for Brandon Cooks. They signed Randall Cobb to a big money deal. They signed Andre Roberts. I
think the best wide receiver in that room right now, JJ, is Kiki Kuti.
Yeah,
as their third wide receiver option at this point. I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from Brandon Cooks, but I mean, both him and Cobb are on the downside of their careers. I mean, Kuti became a nice piece for Deshaun Watson the last couple of years. So, I mean, if anybody is who to look forward to, yeah, I mean, look, Brian, I mean, the only reason I put them level maybe with the Jaguars is if Deshaun Watson is still there. I think Deshaun Watson can at least deliver them a couple of wins. I'm not expecting 0-17, but I mean, 0-17 might be on the table if Tyrod Taylor's their starting quarterback. But I think, if Deshaun Watson is the starting quarterback for the Texans come September, then yeah, I mean, maybe they're a 4 or 5 win team, and I'm probably pushing it by saying 4 or 5 wins, because I think that's where I see the Jags because I think they're just going to struggle with a rookie quarterback. He's going to have his growing pains. So yeah, I mean, they're going if Deshaun gets traded, yeah, they're probably 2 wins or less, to Joey's point and to yours. But I think Deshaun, if he's still there, probably guarantees them 2, maybe 3 wins.
Yeah, I find it crazy because, again, you look at what this Houston Texans team has, and just by looking at some of the names that they've got, they actually have decent names here. That really is unfortunate that, you can't have these 6 guys on a 53-man roster, lead the way, because this team really, again, some of their players are decent. Former center for the Seattle Seahawks, Justin Britt, who was a vital part to Seattle making the playoffs the last few years. He's down there in Houston. You've got Marcus Cannon, who is a mainstay on right tackle in New England. He's down there in Houston. Laramie Tunsil, we know about the trade between the Dolphins and the Texans. Tunsil is no longer obviously in Miami. He's down in Houston. That's the pretty good protection for Deshaun Watson. But again, the whole part of the running backs room, which really has not been a problem for this team. You look at Mark Ingram, who signed a deal there. Philip Lindsay is also there, as well as David Johnson and even Rex Burkhead. Exactly.
Yeah, so that's actually quite interesting considering how bad the Texans are probably going to be. But
and I can't believe I'm saying this, but they've got a 4-headed monster down in their running back room. They really do, because those 4 back in their heyday, that would destroy everybody. That is a Pro Bowl running back locker room that they had, or have rather. It's really crazy stuff. Rob DeLuca, you're back from some Wi-Fi issues. Let's hear your thoughts on the Houston Texans this year.
Yeah, let's hope to God that I fixed it. I really do. I mean, we noticed 2 weeks ago I was having those issues, so hopefully is whatever I tried worked. So, but it already looked like I had a glitch since I've returned, so clearly didn't work. But the Houston Texans, let's think about this. Bad. They're not going to be good. It'll be even worse if Deshaun Watson is gone. But as Ian said, Deshaun Watson can get them a couple of wins, probably to put them on par with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But with everything going on with Deshaun Watson right now, unless he gets his name cleared, he's not going to have any trade value, even though he wants out of Houston. He needs to get his name cleared to have any shot at a trade right now. So that's going to, we'll sit on that, wait and see. But otherwise, obviously, Deshaun Watson is still a good quarterback. He could still produce at a high rate in the NFL. There's no question about that. He's young, he's good, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But he doesn't want to be in Houston. So that leaves a question of how hard is he really gonna try in Houston, because he knows how good he is. The league knows how good he is. So if he's able to get his name cleared, he'll be gone really quickly.
Houston has a tough road ahead of them. They
do.
start.
It's a long one.
Yeah, and they start with Jacksonville, hosting Jacksonville in Houston.
They got to take advantage of that one out of the gate.
Then they go to Cleveland. Then they go to Cleveland. They're probably going to get walloped there. They come back Thursday night, week 3, and host Carolina. Then they go up to Buffalo. That's going to be another one. Then they welcome in New England, who, again, in my opinion, we'll talk about the AFC East in a couple of weeks. It's evident that New England is on the uprise with those 2 brand new tight ends that is going to be showing off this year. Bill Belichick will be showing them off. Week 6, they go to Indianapolis. Week 7, they're in Arizona. Week 8, they host the LA Rams. Just by looking at this is maybe a win or 2.
I like Brian's bold. I like Brian's bold prediction.
0-9 start. I mean, this is
I love Brian's bold prediction to open the year there. It's real bold. I love it.
Houston and Jacksonville tie to open the year. Well, I mean, listen, it's very possible that it can happen. That there could be
it's going to be a 49-49 tie
disaster.
Lawrence and Watson throw 7 touchdowns each.
There, Rob, on the offensive output from the Texans and maybe the Jags too.
Well, I'll tell you this: I think that week 12 it's going to be a dogfight between the New York Jets and the Houston Texans. Brian Morales,
it's going to be a fight.
What is your take on the New York Jets playing the Houston Texans down in Houston? Who gets the win, or is that the second tie of the season? We expect your answer.
Please don't get them started.
Exactly.
The Jets. Exactly.
Yes. Well, I mean, listen, week 12, that is Thanksgiving. Yeah, he says, Joey, there you go. Well, I can't blame him, because again, just by looking at the remainder of the schedule, there's no other wins except Jacksonville, maybe, and maybe Arizona. That's tough. I think Arizona is definitely on the uphill, even though Chandler Jones requested a trade this actually today. But let's keep moving on here, guys. 8:22. We've got about 8 more minutes before our guest arrives, and that will leave us just enough time to preview the Jacksonville Jaguars season, which is pretty much a solid 8-second preview because it's a disaster, or an 8-minute preview because they are going to be a disaster. Ian Schraier, let's start with you here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Where do we even start with them?
I don't want to call the Jacksonville Jaguars a disaster. Look, I'm not thrilled with the way they drafted by any stretch as outside T-Law. I mean, they did not need a running back, and they went out there and drafted Travis Etienne to pair him with his college quarterback, which again made no sense to me. I mean, you have an undrafted free agent last year in James Robinson, who really broke out in that running back room for Jacksonville last year and is now listed as a number 2 back, but behind Etienne. I guess it. I mean, look, I'm not trying to say put all your stake in Urban Meyer to wow the world and become a successful NFL coach year 1, but you have to like what's in that room offensively. I mean, you have to like DJ Chark coming back after a real strong year last year. Laviska Shenault. Again, the aforementioned James Robinson. I mean, it's all on the development of T-Law at this point for the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's a lot of good stories there right now, aside from Urban coaching and Lawrence at QB and even Tebow at tight end in training camp. I think for the Jaguars, they're the 3rd best team in that division. I think they're going to be competitive. They were competitive last year. Let's not factor that in. I mean, if you want to compare them and stand them up against a team like the Titans, I think that's an unfair judgment, just because the Titans are just that much better on paper than the Jaguars are. I think the Jags can compete with the Colts, maybe. I'm not saying for second place, but I think on the field, come the 2 times they play this season, I think those games will be a little bit closer than people might think they will be, just based on the two teams that'll be on the field. But I don't think the Jaguars are a dumpster fire by any stretch. I think they're going to be competitive. I think they're going to be fun to watch. Urban Meyer always gets his guys to play. That was at college, and we've seen a lot of college coaches not have their philosophies transition to the pro game. But I think they're going to be interesting. They're going to be a fun team to watch, and I'm excited to watch the Jags this year. They were competitive last year. I expect them to be competitive again.
They were also able to get Andrew Norwell.
2 years ago.
Yeah,
so
2 years ago. Yeah, and now he's going to be playing a vital role with
that was a Coughlin signing.
Yeah, and really with Trevor Lawrence, to see what really can go down over there. I think that Trevor Lawrence is able to come into a decent room, and he's also got some, I would say, even decent offensive linemen in front of him as well. Really it also goes for James Robinson as well, who last year had a phenomenal year. Keep that in mind. He had a great year. It's going to be.
Can I just add this real quick, just because we're on Jacksonville?
Sure.
What I love so much, and I'm saying this facetiously, is that how Jalen Ramsey said how much that team hated Tom Coughlin in the role that he was in. And meanwhile, who was the president of football operations the year they went to the AFC Championship game?
Yeah, gee, I wonder. Ian, it beats me.
Sorry, Joey. I just wanted to elaborate on that point, just because of Jalen Ramsey and the type of talent that he is, and the mouth that he is. To say
big old mouth. Yeah, the only time you won, bro. The only time you won.
Literally, the only thing that can be said with Jalen Ramsey. It's not ideal with him, not ideal with them. Guys, I want to keep moving forward here and actually, just before we keep going here, I want to just bring up Brian Morales' comment. Urban and Tebow like lamb and tuna fish, maybe spaghetti and meatballs. I digress.
Very, very nice Big Daddy reference, though. I like that, though.
That's pretty good. That is pretty good. Guys, Chandler Jones today, he requested a trade out of Arizona. Why is he requesting a trade out of Arizona? Ian Schraier, do you maybe have a thought of why Chandler Jones would be requesting a trade out of Arizona?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know he's coming off an injury-plagued season, but I'll tell you a team that should be calling. They play in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and they wear the color blue. That's a team that's in dire need of pass rush help. They're gonna have,
for the right price, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Look, they've got 2 first-round picks. I'm not saying that they should give up one of them, but I think I think having those 2 first-round picks on the table and
it's helpful.
Draft, it's entertaining. But the thing is, they're going to have to clear a little bit of cap room too. I mean, they're up there pretty tight. I think
they are. Yeah,
4 million under. So I'm not sure who would go back to Arizona in that deal.
It'd be tough to see. That's why I don't know if we can pull it off. But
that's something that Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman and
they should at least discuss it. I don't see it overall happening, but they should at least be discussing it. And as long as they discuss it, it's all that matters.
Sticking to Arizona, though. Yeah. Rob DeLuca, do you have any possible thought process of why Chandler Jones would want out of Arizona, especially when they are on the uphill?
Yeah, no, that's what's interesting to me. It makes me really wonder what could possibly lead Chandler Jones to want to leave, because there's no doubt Arizona's going in the correct direction towards winning, towards playoff runs, towards deep playoff runs. So
maybe he didn't like the JJ Watt signing.
I can't imagine why. It only makes your team better, unless you personally don't like JJ Watt. I don't know how anyone could not like that man. But but yeah, I'm a little mind boggled as to why that he wants out right now. Maybe it's got to be something internal that nobody knows about, but you can't speculate on that either, because then that leads to bad things. So it's confusing overall.
Do we see Chandler Jones making more than the round or approximate $21 million that he's making this upcoming year, which, by the way, is a contract year? Do we see him making more on the open market next year?
That really depends on his performance.
It does.
This year. I mean,
because he's 30.
That question on your own there, Joey. I mean, that really depends on his output this year. He's an all-pro defensive. He's
He
an
is,
all-pro edge
but
rusher. I mean,
he's
there's no
30 now.
denying that. I mean, it's just a matter of can he bounce back from a season where he lost almost the whole year to injury.
Yep.
I think I think a lot of people feel on the whole that he can and he will. But I mean, if he does, I mean, he's going to get all that and then some.
Yeah, back in 2019, he played 15 games and he played 89% of the snaps, had 19 sacks. He was just a few shy away from Michael Strahan's single season record. 53 tackles, 41 of those solo. And he also had 8 forced fumbles. That was tops in the NFL as well. This to me is really a one giant question mark. I don't understand why we're seeing that. I don't understand why Chandler Jones would want out, especially when, again, as we brought up, Arizona is simply on the upswing. It does not make any sense. So again, there really is no further explanation for this. And again, just the year prior, he did pretty much the same exact thing. He didn't have as many sacks. He did have 49 tackles. Again, he played 5 games last year before getting hurt, had 1 sack, 11 tackles. And when you look last year at what Chandler Jones was doing, or rather what the Arizona Cardinals were doing, they were right in the hunt over there until they completely fell off the face of the earth down the stretch. Not a good look for the rest of the Arizona Cardinals and really for the league as well. Guys, let's do a little sports update prior to our guest coming aboard. Justin Mello is here in the studio. We will get him on in just a few seconds once his camera comes on. Paul Stastny is heading back to Winnipeg. 1 year, $3.75 million AAV. And I think that's a fantastic deal for what Winnipeg needs, which is centers, and even more centers, because over there in Winnipeg, I don't think the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal has really worked out too well. And even though he can shift around, it's not that great. But
good deal for Winnipeg. Honestly, they get the big guy to come home, and even just for a year, we'll see how they can affect their playoff run.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And let's get Justin Mello on here. Let's take a peek and see. It looks as if that Justin will not be able to be on camera, but we can have him. We can have him on audio. So let's bring him on here. And it looks as if that we're still gonna keep on with our 3 screen here. Justin, thank you so much for coming on here. Let's introduce Justin Mello, host of the podcast, the Music City Audible for Broadway Sports, writer for the Tennessee Titans for Broadway Sports and Music City Miracles, and also covers the NFL Draft for the Draft Network. Justin, how are you? Thank you so much for coming on our show.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ian Schraier, let's get things started here with the Tennessee Titans in our AFC South preview here on the Primetime Rundown.
First off, Justin, thank you so much for coming on. This is Ian Schraier here with the Primetime Rundown. And I want to start here. I think this is the most important place to start because I don't want to ignore really the 2 pink elephants in the room, one being Derrick Henry and the other being the acquisition of Julio Jones in the offseason. And I want to look back on the postseason game last year against Baltimore and how Derrick Henry was only held to 40 yards rushing in that game against Baltimore last year. I don't want to ask a question that might seem so obvious, but based on what you've seen with the Titans and as we enter into training camp, how important of a role does it really, with no more Corey Davis and now Julio Jones entering that wide receiver room, and you know what he can do, you know what kind of factor he is in the red zone as well, and that big playability. What kind of factor does Julio Jones play for this team going forward, and especially to take a little pressure off Derrick Henry to really put up 200 yards a game every night?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it. The most important thing there is for them to be versatile and for them to spread the ball around. When you go back and revisit that playoff loss against Baltimore, What was particularly disappointing to me about that game was that they started well passing the ball. A.J. Brown had a great first half. And then they kind of got away from that, right? They got away from the passing game, and credit where credit's due. The Baltimore Ravens defensive line, they won the battle. They won the line of scrimmage, and they shut down Derrick Henry, and they shut down that running game. I think with the acquisition of Julio Jones, replacing Corey Davis, who had a good year in his own right, but let's be honest, Corey Davis is not Julio Jones, right? So I think getting a guy like Julio in there should allow them to be more versatile and not be overly reliant on Derrick Henry, and to not be one-dimensional in these key games. When it comes to the playoffs, the Titans want to run the ball. That's not a secret, and that's not about to change. They will run the ball a lot in 2021. I can guarantee that. But the important thing is when you're playing a team like Baltimore, a team that's got a great D-line that can shut that down by putting 8 in the box like they did during that playoff game and really threatening Tennessee to beat them on the outside. Well, now with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, that's a bit of a different ball game when they've got one-on-one matchups out there.
And we know what Julio provides based on his resume, and the same for A.J. Brown. But I want to ask this, and my prediction is that the Tennessee Titans, unless Carson Wentz just really blows us all away, unlike Joey's prediction of the Colts being the team to beat in the AFC South, my prediction is for the Titans to really win again, unless Carson Wentz blows us all away, to win the AFC South going away. So my question is I think the biggest question marks for the Titans come on defense coming into the 2021 season. So there's no denying that it's more than just an AFC South division title that's on the table again for the Tennessee Titans this year. The peak right now is Super Bowl. This team is built for a Super Bowl right now. They're built to go up against the Bills. They're built to go up against the Chiefs. What is the key really to that defense and the key overall to Mike Vrabel's scheme for the Titans to get there this season?
Yeah, I think the key is for them to stay healthy, and maybe catch a few better breaks. Bringing in Jadeveon Clowney and Vic Beasley last year was supposed to be huge, right? And that was supposed to kind of transform that defense and take them to the next level. Those two signings went about as badly as they could go, right? With Vic Beasley not really showing any effort or care really to play football last year, and Jadeveon Clowney injuries popping up once again, and getting 0 sacks combined from those two guys when they paid more than $20 million for them on one-year deals each was nothing short of a disaster. So what the key is this year is, it's an unknown, and I find that really interesting. Nobody knows what this Titans defense is really going to be this coming season, because in the offseason, they sent a clear message that personnel, meaning players, they believe that was the problem, not coaching. Right? They kept defensive coordinator Shane Bowen, albeit he didn't hold the title defensive coordinator last season. He was the play caller. They went ahead and added the defensive coordinator title to him now, which, as you can imagine, wasn't very popular with Titans fans based on the defensive performance last season. But they did that, and they made sweeping changes to the personnel. The secondary especially. Kenny Vaccaro, gone. Malcolm Butler, gone. Dory Jackson, gone. Desmond King, gone. That's their top 3 corners and one of their starting safeties, right, that they got rid of in the offseason, replaced with a veteran in Janoris Jenkins and a couple of rookies in Caleb Farley and Elijah Molden. So this defense is completely different. The personnel, sweeping changes. I don't think anyone really knows what to expect, but I think the one saving grace for Titans fans is that the defense was atrocious last season. I mean, it really was god-awful. And they finished the year 11-5. I mean, can it be any worse than it was a year ago? It's tough to imagine that being the case, but we're going to find out in a couple of weeks.
Do you think, and as a Giants fan, I want to touch on this point because you had mentioned the loss in the secondary. It seemed like the biggest loss in terms of how poor that defense played was in the front 7, more in the defensive backfield. So do you feel in the defensive backfield for Tennessee, losing a veteran player like Malcolm Butler, losing a player like an Adoree Jackson, replacing them with a veteran presence like Janoris Jenkins, who's really a few years removed now from an all-pro season, is really going to transform that defensive backfield now for Tennessee?
Yeah.
I don't know that it's going to transform the defensive backfield. One thing I'll say is Adoree Jackson was a non-factor last year. It's very easy for people to look at the Titans roster and say, oh, well, they lost Adoree Jackson. That's a big loss. It's not. He played 3 football games last year. He picked up a mysterious injury before week 1, was labeled as day-to-day, and then didn't play until week 15. and nobody really knew what was wrong with him. And he was horrible when he came back. I mean, we're just going to call it what it is. He was very, very bad when they inserted him back into the lineup towards the end of last year. In fact, there are heavy rumors in that city, and I'm not going to pretend to know more on this than the next guy, but a lot of people feel that Adoree Jackson was released due to an attitude problem. It's not like he was due a whole ton of money. There are a lot of whispers that the team wasn't thrilled regarding how he attacked his rehab. Because, again, day-to-day before week 1 doesn't pop up before week 15. It was a very strange situation in Tennessee last year. Malcolm Butler played good football, but he's getting older, and the salary was very hefty. So, Janoris Jenkins, I see him as a Malcolm Butler replacement. He's the guy they've brought in to be a veteran and to lead that corner group. And then the rest of it, look, a guy that people are forgetting about that, if you watch college football, everyone seemed to love at LSU was Christian Fulton. He was a rookie last year. They received a lot of praise for taking him in the second round. And Fulton, unfortunately, was slowed throughout training camp with injury. And again, being a rookie last year, and I had this conversation with Fulton, it was difficult. Coming in with COVID, not getting a rookie mini camp, not getting OTAs, and then him getting banged up the way he got banged up. It just was strange. It was a strange rookie year for him. So they're looking for Christian Fulton to take a huge step forward this year. You bring in Caleb Farley, your first-round pick. Of course, there's a question mark there with the back injury, and he's starting training camp on the NFI list. There are a lot of question marks in the secondary, and that's why it goes back to my point. No one knows how this thing is going to go. There's a lot of potential there. Guys like Christian Fulton, guys like Caleb Farley, a guy like Elijah Molden, who I absolutely loved coming out of the University of Washington in this most recent draft class. There is so much potential. There's so much excitement here, but there's a lot of question marks as well.
I'll wrap up my part of the segment here, Justin, and thank you so much for all of your responses. I want to dive in a little bit here into the division, because even though I did mention that I feel that the Titans are going to win the division going away, I want to ask you your opinion specifically on the Colts and where you feel, not maybe where they stack up, because it's, Carson Wentz reuniting with his old OC in Philadelphia, but where do you see Wentz working along with that offense in Indianapolis? Do you think there's something to gel and that that the Colts are a legitimate threat to Tennessee as AFC South champions this year?
I mean, they both finished with the same record last year at 11-5. I think people forget that. And the Titans won the division on a last-second field goal by a kicker who had just been there for a couple days, right? And it took a dink off the goalpost and went in, right? So it was good. So I think it's going to be close once again. I do think the question mark regarding Carson Wentz is large enough where I feel confident considering the Titans to be favorites to win the AFC South once again. I'll be quite surprised if the Titans don't win the division crown, but I've been predicting all summer long. I do think Carson Wentz I don't know that he'll be quite as good as Phillip Rivers was for the Colts last year. Not that Rivers was terrific, but he's certainly good enough, right, to get them to the record that they had. I do think Carson Wentz won't be a disaster, and I do think he'll have a decent season. I think he'll bounce back with Frank Reich there in Indianapolis. I see a 9, maybe a 10-win season on the horizon for Indianapolis, whereas Tennessee, I'll be surprised if they don't win about 11 games once again.
DeLuca, you want to take this, or shall I?
Sure thing. Yeah, Justin, thank you again for being on. Let me now that you gave your opinion on the division, let me just ask kind of a different question here. If the Indianapolis Colts are to somehow surpass the Tennessee Titans as division winners this year, what would have to be a move that the Tennessee Titans have to make in order to make sure that does not happen again? Because I got to be honest, the odds of anybody other than the Titans taking this division, in my opinion at least, are very low.
Yeah, I think if the Colts win the division, it's tough to say. Obviously, we're forecasting. One or two things happened. Carson Wentz absolutely plays lights out and regains even the MVP form that we once saw from him in Philadelphia. Or Tennessee's defense was once again an absolute disaster, and the offense isn't quite able to overcome the defense like they were last year. With that said, I mean, what would have to happen for the Titans offense not to be able to overcome? I mean, it would be shocking, right? If this offense doesn't put up close to 30 points a game with Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Ryan Tannehill has obviously performed very well in that offense. You'd have to think there'd have to be some injuries for it to happen. Maybe a Julio Jones. We had his injury issues last year. Ryan Tannehill's had his injury issues in the past. Granted, those were several years ago. But for the Colts to win the division, I think it's either the fact that Carson Wentz just plays lights out football and regains that MVP form, or the Titans offense is banged up with injury.
So, Justin, thank you this is Joey over here. Thank you very much for coming on here. We really all appreciate it. And I want to close with these two questions for you. The big thing here for the Tennessee Titans, obviously, they were able to acquire Julio Jones. That's good and all. But they also lost a big piece on their offense in Jonnu Smith, who went to the New England Patriots. Talk about the possible... in case, let's just say, for instance, on the off chance that Julio Jones were to, not see eye to eye with Ryan Tannehill. And Jonnu Smith last year was really a, almost like a security blanket for Ryan Tannehill. Talk about what Anthony Ferkser can do, how he can replace Jonnu Smith, or is he even replaceable on this offense for the Titans?
Yeah, I've said all summer long, I think the biggest two things they lost in Jonnu Smith, headed over to New England, is versatility at the tight end position and a weapon in the red zone. Jonnu Smith, look, you can pull up the stats. He didn't light the league on fire when it comes to a receptions or a yard standpoint. That wasn't really his thing, but he did put up 8 touchdowns. And anytime you have to replace 8 touchdowns on offense, predominantly, of course, in the red zone, that could be a difficult thing to do. Of course, Julio Jones, we know who I think, the touchdown totals didn't always tell the story of him in Atlanta. I think he's a great red zone player, and perhaps Atlanta didn't take full advantage of that at times. But with Jonnu Smith, you got to replace the 8 touchdowns. Another thing that I think would have me slightly worried about replacing Jonnu is the versatility. He's a good run blocker, and he's a good pass catcher. I'm not so sure the Titans have a guy like that at tight end anymore. Anthony Ferkser, while I think is a really underrated pass catcher, a great route runner, you saw that touchdown he had against New England in the playoffs a couple of years ago. Everyone remembers that one to open the score up. They've never asked him to run block. I mean, they just really haven't done that at all. So you worry, you get into the conversation with, did he take a step forward in that area this offseason? And when he's on the field, are you tipping your hand? I think that's huge. I think not enough people talk about that. It's important to keep the defense on their toes. When Jonnu Smith's on the field, I don't know if it's run or pass. When Anthony Ferkser's on the field, there's a good chance that it's pass, right? That's kind of how it's been in the past. So how do they sort of make up for that? How do they overcome that challenge? One of the things I can see them doing is just running a lot more 11 personnel this year. I think you'll see less of those 2 tight end sets that they've used in the past, and I think you'll see more often 3 receivers. I mean, you went out and got Julio Jones. I don't think Julio and AJ are going to come off the field very often. And then you got a guy like Josh Reynolds, who I think can play that number 3 role for you, acquired in free agency from the Los Angeles Rams. So I have a feeling you're going to see a bit of a shift in philosophy, especially with a new offensive coordinator, by the way. Wouldn't even touch on that with Arthur Smith leaving and becoming head coach in Atlanta. You got Todd Downing now, a guy who ran a lot more 11 personnel the last time he was offensive coordinator with the Raiders. So I think that's one of the things you'll see this year.
So I want to actually add on one more question here, Justin, because just by looking at some of the stats with Jonnu Smith, as you brought up earlier, he had 8 touchdowns. And then also with Corey Davis heading over to the New York Jets, he also had 5 touchdowns. That's a combined 13 touchdowns that now have to be replaced. So with Julio Jones being very capable of doing or of catching said 13 touchdowns, not only is the pressure on Julio Jones, who else aside from Jones and Brown do you see possibly coming into the forefront and possibly becoming a breakout candidate this year for the Titans heading into the 2021 season?
I think the most important thing here, and one of the reasons I don't think the Titans will miss a beat, is obviously this offense is going to run through A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry, right? The 3 of them are obviously going to combine for the bulk of the team's touchdowns. But again, I think Anthony Ferkser is a good player, a great pass catcher who will catch, 4 or 5 touchdowns this year. Darrington Evans is a guy that they drafted in the 3rd round 2 years ago. Rookie year was derailed. Look, they drafted him to be a change of pace guy to Derrick Henry. Didn't work out last year due to injury, but he's also a guy that's a really good pass catcher as a number 2 back, a totally different skill set than Derrick Henry has. I expect to see a lot more of Darrington Evans this year. And the other guy that I mentioned being Josh Reynolds, coming over from the Rams. Look, he's played in this offense before, basically, right? That was part of the reason he signed in Tennessee, coming over from the Rams, and what Sean McVay did over there is very similar to what Arthur Smith did and even before Arthur Smith, what Matt LaFleur was doing in Tennessee, what Arthur Smith was doing. And I don't think Todd Downing's going to reinvent the wheel. They're not about to change what led to 30 points a game, right? 30 points roughly a game last season for them. So when you look at the secondary weapons, Anthony Ferkser, Darrington Evans, Josh Reynolds, I think these guys will be more than enough to help pick up the slack whenever A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry need a helping hand.
Yeah. And my final question to you, Justin, is that we look at the regular season for the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, they won the division last year, and we look at what they did this upcoming year, their upcoming schedule. Weeks 1 through 4 is not easy, with the exception of week 4. But again, you can't count out any team. That includes the New York Jets, who they will be playing on October 3rd. But the first 3 weeks, Arizona, at Seattle, and against Indianapolis to start the season. For, a random thought, I guess, if things were to go south in the first 4 weeks of the season, do the sirens light up for these Tennessee Titans? And especially since Tennessee is becoming this huge sports town, the Titans and the Predators, every single team that is in the Tennessee area, they're getting more and more attention. So what happens, let's say, for instance, if the Titans get off to a 1-3 start on the season? Does Mike Vrabel's seat get extremely hot? What happens there?
I think if the Titans start 1-3, no, I don't think Mike Vrabel's seat gets hot. I think he's relatively safe for now, especially during the first couple of weeks. But I think the guy that'll probably be, or the two guys that'll be facing the most heat, you look to the left and right of Mike Vrabel. You look at his offensive coordinator, Todd Downing, of course, that being a big decision, having to replace Arthur Smith. And then even bigger than that, keeping Shane Bowen and making him the defensive coordinator what was certainly the most unpopular decision they made this offseason. So if they're 1-3, people are going to look to those two guys. Either the offense is underproducing and Downing is, they feel maybe, or the fans feel maybe isn't the guy to replace Arthur Smith, or the defense is just as bad as it was last year. And everyone says, I cannot believe Mike Vrabel decided to keep Shane Bowen when he ran an awful defense last year and is doing it again. So I think if they're those are 4 tough games, like you said, relatively. If they're 2-2, I don't think that's the end of the world. I don't think you'll hear anyone panicking. But if they're 1 or 3 or worse, then yeah, I think you will see a lot of panic from that fan base.
Yeah, it's really tough. But the Tennessee Titans, the pressure is on them in the AFC South. We'll see what happens in this upcoming NFL season. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Mello, host of the podcast, the Music City Audible for Broadway Sports, and a writer for the Tennessee Titans for the aforementioned Broadway Sports and Music City Miracles. And he also covers the NFL draft for the Draft Network. Justin, thank you so much for coming on here, even though the miscommunication with the video, it all worked out perfectly. And we hope to have you back on in the future, either audio or video, whatever it may be. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, my apologies regarding that. Didn't realize you would need video, but always happy to be on. Appreciate you for having me.
Absolutely, Justin. Have a great one. Thanks again. We'll speak to you soon. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, Justin Mello, we really appreciate him coming on, and it worked out great with just the audio. So it worked out well again for all of our audio listeners. Actually, this is the perfect way for to listen to Justin Mello, who previewed the Tennessee Titans very well. And, he thinks just like what Ian and Rob think, where the Titans are going to win the division. I think not so fast. And some of the things that I had brought up was, you got to replace a few guys. And if things go awry, especially with this tight schedule, again, 18 week season, you got 17 games now. That one extra game could make or break a season. And Tennessee, we did not expect them to lose against Baltimore. They did in the last year. I think they got better, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be a great 2021 season. Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we will be previewing two divisions, the AFC North and the NFC East. Be on the lookout for our guests from the AFC North and the NFC East on Twitter by following us at Observe Eastern. Guys, let's conclude with a couple of sports updates. Jets assistant coach Greg Knapp passed away from injuries he sustained in a biking accident. He was hit by a car. Really tough stuff there for Greg Knapp and really for the New York Jets organization. I believe he was in his late 50s, which is even worse. So, really just prayers up to his family and to the Jets organization, to the Knapp family, and to everyone associated with former New York Jets assistant coach Greg Knapp. And also, the New York Post is reporting that New York Rangers are expected to sign right-handed defenseman Patrick Nemeth in unrestricted free agency beginning on Wednesday. So we will see what happens there with the Rangers. Guys, let's get to our kudos. Rob DeLuca, let's start with you on your kudos. Who do we?
Yeah, mine's real simple right now. We're sending out the good vibes to USA Soccer. They're on their way to the semifinals in the Gold Cup. And it was a tough game against Jamaica last night. It was a 1-0 final in the 83rd minute with a goal from the United States. And it was a real tight game. It shouldn't have been that close. They didn't play particularly well, but we stay prideful to this country, and we ride those good vibes, hopefully all the way to the Gold Cup championship.
So that's excellent put or very well put. Ian does not have a kudos tonight, so I will kind of combine, I guess, a little bit of his, because I'm kind of going to take a little bit of what he does for a living and put it here together with what I do in the summer. So Hamptons Collegiate Baseball League, the upcoming championship series is between the Southampton Breakers and the Riverhead Tomcats. And the reason why I give my kudos to Adelphi baseball head coach Bill Ianciello is because his team finished the season on a 6-game losing streak. And since then, they have won 3 straight to make their way back into the Hamptons Collegiate Baseball League final. They will be taking on the 1-seeded Southampton Breakers. The Riverhead Tomcats, led by Ianciello, went from the 1 seed, about a 2-game lead, and fell so far down as far as the 4th seed, where now they will be starting on the road on Wednesday at 4 p.m. That can be heard here on the Eastern Observer. So that will be some good stuff. And that is also their 3rd straight trip to the Summer League Finals. For those that do not know what the Hamptons Collegiate Baseball League is, it's a smaller version of the Cape Cod League, just out here in the Hamptons. And a lot of players that are there's actually one from Adelphi that Ian knows very well, Nick Luke. He will be going to the Cape Cod League once the league is done, or his team actually was just eliminated. So he will be making his way up. Sag Harbor's DJ Perrin just signed with Chatham with the Anglers. He will be finishing his season up in the Cape Cod League. And, a lot of the guys that don't make it right out of the starting gate for the Cape Cod League, they eventually come down to the Hamptons League, which is just as good. And you're out on Long Island. So really a fun place to play and also a fun place to work as well. So really kudos to the Riverhead Tomcats, and more notably, Adelphi's baseball head coach, Bill Ianciello, for getting his team out of a massive slump. So Ian is done here tonight. I think it looks as if that we are going to finish on time. Yeah, I can't believe it. And I'll tell you this much.
That's what my kudos goes to tonight, guys.
Wow. Well, and I think Ian's kudos, actually, I'm going to do Ian's kudos for him tonight. And his kudos is that we are finishing on time because he was at the Bronx Zoo all day with his daughter, Emma, and his wife, Christine, and he is ready to knock out and go to bed. You see?
I'm actually not, believe it or not, but
that is such a lie, because when he rushes us off later,
Ian, you're old, you lie.
There's no doubt about it. Ladies and gentlemen, another great show here tonight. We cannot thank Director of Media Relations for Wagner College, Brian Morales. Excuse me, I was getting his name combined with Tyler Adele's because both of them were on this show tonight, giving multiple comments. We really appreciate them being consistent viewers and consistent guests to really just, give us as many comments as possible and join the show in that regard. Ladies and gentlemen, on Thursday, we will be hosting the 2021 Free Agent Frenzy Special in the National Hockey League. That comes your way Thursday, July 29th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Eastern Observer. We will be welcoming the fourth period's Dennis Bernstein, as well as Newsday's Andrew Gross, as well as our recurring guest, Mike Szabo, to chat all about the National Hockey League and the first 24 hours in the 2021-22 NHL season. All good things ahead. Let's keep on moving forward here, folks. Tomorrow night, beginning at 6 p.m., the Essential Wrestling Podcast, presented to you by Pro Wrestling Pick'em, will be coming to you live at 6 p.m. right here on the Eastern Observer. It can be replayed on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, as well as YouTube and Spotify. All good things ahead. Let's keep on moving here by subscribing to the Daily Wrestling News Show on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, and also by searching on the I-95 Sports Network. Be sure to tune in to them every Monday through Thursday, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time right here on the Eastern Observer. All good things ahead, ladies and gentlemen. Next Monday night, we will be returning back following our special on Thursday night, alongside my guys Ian Schraier and Rob DeLuca. I'm Joey Jarzynka. For all of us here at the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group, we will see everyone on Thursday night.